Unleashed is brought to you by the Junction Eating Place at 816 West Lincoln Highway in DeKalb. Open 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. The Junction is a longtime DeKalb staple with world-famous breakfast served all day long and the best lunch and dinner specials. Stop on by today and tell them TD sent you.
Look at you, having it together. You've got a car. You have a house. Now get your car and house insured together with a State Farm agent. A local agent can help you customize your coverage and save when you bundle your home and auto insurance. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability, amount of discount, savings, and eligibility may vary.
See State Farm agent Scott Zimet at 2587 Sycamore Road, Suite D in DeKalb, or call 815-748-3101. Like a good neighbor, Scott Zimet is there.
And welcome in to TD Ryan Unleashed podcast number 8, and honored and privileged to have with us the city manager of DeKalb, Mr. Bill Nicklas. Bill, how you doing, my friend?
Good, Terry. It's very good to see you, sir.
This is kind of Bill Nicklas take 2, isn't it? Because you obviously were a city manager back in 1992, if I have that right, and then you went over to Sycamore in 98, and then you went to NIU, and then Kishwaukee College, and then back there.
That's right. Can't hold a job, Terry.
I just can't hold a job. Well, you know, it's funny, Bill, because we use the term community all the time, and you have literally lived that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've worked at all the places, DeKalb, Sycamore, NIU, Kishwaukee College, and boy, we realized the value of that community college through the years, haven't we?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, for me personally, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to work in these various environments. And it's just wonderful that we have a terrific community college in Kishwaukee College and a major state university in our midst. And I didn't have to go very far from home to do what I do in both environments.
Well, and you did it very well, I might point out, too. And you know, I looked up the term civil servant. Civil servant is a nonpartisan professional who delivers government services and upholds democracy at home and abroad. Now, am I insulting you by calling you a civil servant, Bill?
No, you've never insulted me. I don't think you could. But, well, a civil servant also has a more technical, way of being sold these days too. It has to do with certain bureaucracy and so forth. I never thought of myself as a bureaucrat. I'm a very action-oriented guy. That's how I grew up as a young adult, and I had my own business, and I work with my hands, and I never knew exactly where my next dollar was coming from unless I worked for it and all that stuff. So by the time I got into my late 30s and I moved into the public sector, my idea was that I'm in this only as long as I'm useful. And I've always told my bosses that. I think I've only worked, usually I get hired on a contract and then it expires after a year because people are right to say, oh, well, we're not sure how it's going to go, so we'll do it for a year.
Okay.
And I do it for a year, and then usually I don't get asked to sign another one because they know they can tell me, you've lost a kid, you're down the road, or we like what you're doing, and here's some other stuff we want you to do. That's what that's why I say I've been blessed, because people have been very kind to me in that respect.
Yeah, Becky always says, don't say you're lucky, say you're blessed, and you're blessed with that. But obviously you did those jobs efficiently that they didn't need you to stick around anymore, which is again, removing your own necessity.
Yeah.
Now, what about retirement? Now, you've been doing this for a long time. Why do you keep doing what you're doing?
I
don't like that.
I don't know.
Like that word.
I don't know what I do with myself. I don't know how I retire from being curious, and I can't retire from wanting to make a difference and wanting to make things a little bit better around me and work with good people that have similar orientations. And I'm having a hard time doing it. As you know, I've failed 3 times or 4. I don't know how many times it's been. So I was
still
looking
doing
at the
research for this interview, and I saw a headline: Bill Nicklas to retire, and then I realized it was your first retirement at NIU.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But then right after that, so I thought, how am I going to do? And can I tell you this story? This is an absolute true story. It was on a Friday. It was Halloween, and I figured, well, I'll take the weekend off, which is not typical for me. And then Monday morning, I slept in a little bit, and the school bus was coming by my house, and I was sitting there in my pajamas and having a cup of coffee. I was still there at 3 in the afternoon. I thought, no, this ain't going to work.
No.
So I called a lawyer friend of mine. I said, I've got to do something. I'm going to hang out a shingle. Nicklas Consulting. Never made any money at that. I think in my best year, it might have been 2000. But what saved me, frankly, 4 months later, I wish it had been otherwise, except that the tornado hit Fairdale. And I banged around for a few days, wanting to help and not really having a role. I no longer had an official position. I was just one of many people trying to pick up stuff and help people. But and then a number of people wanted to put together a committee to help people get off the ground, and I ended up doing that for about 16 months every day, and it's probably the best thing I ever did.
We just interviewed Mark Petrowski last week, and he mentioned you. We had mentioned Fairdale because he was on the county board at that time.
Yeah, he was. Very
And he
helpful.
mentioned how instrumental you were in making that happen, Bill. Because, again, I'm not giving you credit for that alone, or I know you didn't do it for that reason, but
No.
to be able to help, like you say, at firsthand, because Mark described walking the streets of Fairdale after the tornado, and it was one thing to see it on the news, he said, but to walk through that. And you walked through that, and you visited with the people that went through it, right?
It was devastating. I mean, it was every day. Truly, when you talk about difference of night and day, that's what it was. And people lost homes, they lost their cars, which blew into trees or blew away, and they couldn't keep their job because they were spending all their days just trying to figure out what the next move is and helping others. The residents there were the real difference. They were kind of a pretty independent, hardy lot, and they wanted to stay. And it was our job. First of all, we had to get through some bureaucracy.
Sure.
And we did that with a lot of collaboration, and we then had to raise money, and a lot of money to help people. At the end, the people who live there were able to. When we were working with them, we were able to get an underground sewer system, much like what we enjoy in municipalities, except all the bad stuff went to a community septic field rather than a treatment plant.
Oh.
And just because Mother Earth was tipped in the right direction. And we brought natural gas, worked with NICOR to the community for the first time, redid the roads because we tore up the roads to put the sewer in, and new stormwater system, and brought Wi-Fi in. Before that, if you were trying to get online, and we had a medical transcriptionist who was working next to our trailer through that year and a half, and she was out of business for a year and a half. So we were trying to get something set up. We put up about a 40-foot tower, worked with a local vendor, and that NIU web that was put in about 20 years ago. There was a hotline right down 72. So plugging into that was like plugging into the universe. And so we got a line legally to this tower, and it used to take 10 minutes for things to warm up for this lady, and all that stuff.
Right.
And so she had the doctor on the other end, and she's sitting in her living room. We had a little crowd around her, and she says to the doctor, "Okay, now I'm going to hit this, and let me know, and we're going to have a cup of coffee. Let me know when this goes." And as soon as she hits it, he goes, "It's here." And I mean, everybody broke into tears.
What a moment.
Yeah, it was. So a little bit of the 21st century, climbing out of the late 19th century, and everybody. I can't say enough about the people who lived there, people who lived in the region there, Kirkland people, and that. So I've been keen on public service work. And it's other people in other public service jobs who made a difference in that case, and generally do every day without any applause. Mm-hmm. And you've made you do so much and have over your life in recognizing people like that, and whether it's firemen, policemen, public works employee, whatever. And that was an occasion where everybody pulled together and gave it their best.
Yeah.
It's moving, and you were talking about democracy. I think that's the best of America right there.
That sure is. I was just watching Mr. Rogers' speech, and he said,
Yeah.
look to the helpers. He was telling the kid to look to the helpers. And it must be wonderful to be a helper like that, especially when those moments where people are just lost. And you talk about the bureaucracy and say, well, we'll get this in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. You were there to tell them, we're going to get this stuff just as soon as we possibly can, right?
What we told them was the very first day, we're not leaving until you don't need us anymore. I remember that very well. Because what else could you tell them? You couldn't say, we're here to help you.
Right.
That would not be the right phrase.
No.
Who are these people? I've never seen them before. And the other ingredient there was that we work with people who they knew. And this is what happens in a small town. Well, I love small towns. Sometimes people are your neighbors. Sometimes you see them in the checkout lanes and all the rest of that. And you have the measure of them a little bit.
Right.
And maybe you're not so... Your first instinct isn't to bang them over the head and say, well, so I like that, and the give and take is better. But I'll tell you, no matter how good things go, the people who are in the public sector jobs, and I have to remind myself of this, have to walk away from the applause. You're not in this, and most people aren't in it for that. But if they are in it for that, then they have to teach themselves to walk away from it because they're there at the trust of you and me. And if you think I'm just giving you a line, this is exactly what I feel and always have.
And it's how you live your life, isn't it?
Well, I try, but since I was the youngest man, my father was in World War II, and I didn't know that much about what he did until later in his life, but I was so proud of that. And he told us enough stories, my twin and I, that I knew that it was important to him to be modest and unassuming, but still to do the right thing every time you get a chance. So,
What branch was he in?
He was in the Army.
Okay.
He was on Okinawa.
Front, yeah?
Yeah. That was the biggest action he was in. And he didn't want to talk about it.
No. None of the vets I met, World War II vets, will not talk about it, and they've done spectacular things.
Because every time they thought they were doing something or whatever, the guy next to them gets it, did something even bigger. So
yeah. Well, I want to talk about your child a little bit, but I want to mention, somebody said that my podcasts were a bit on the dry side, so I said, why don't you tell a joke occasionally?
You want me to sing?
So I have a civil servant joke.
Okay.
The newspaper headline said, City removes all U-turn signs. No turning back now.
I like that.
And that which segues to me into the roundabouts. Let's talk about the roundabouts.
Sorry. Yeah.
We have dueling roundabouts now here in DeKalb. Now, there's a kind of what I call it a practice roundabout over there at NIU. And then, of course, the proposed roundabout on First Street. And I know it's still kind of up in the air, that one, Bill, but tell us about the one at NIU and why that's in there for safety purposes and why the conflict about the one on First Street.
It's pretty new for us. There are some roundabouts in the area. But not that many around.
And we're talking about 47. You go up on 47.
I know.
There's three right in a row there.
Yeah, boom, boom, boom. Generally speaking, the people who design these things, of course, they're going to say this is the safest thing and da-da-da. But there are good safety stats on these. You have to be careful when you're doing it, though. It doesn't automatically solve all the problems. And if it's around a school, especially now, and we have two proposed. Well, one is still very iffy, and that's on North First Street. We don't know where that's going to go. But the one that's going to start next week at Lucinda Normal, right there, high traffic area. It used to be higher traffic, and there were more students in residence.
Sure.
But still, that's the kernel. That's where it all happens. And so you can't have people just running to the island in the middle and then running out. So the crossings are a little bit further away than they are now, right at the heart of the intersection where the two streets cross.
Right.
But the traffic has to slow down. It's a traffic calming thing. And we have a lot of, it seems that maybe it's because of my age, but it seems that people speed. Maybe it's just generally in our culture.
No, it's not your age, Bill.
Okay.
The speeding is atrocious.
And I see people speeding through intersections all the time, mostly to beat the light or something like that. And that's the least safe occasion for
well, the right turn on red, they don't think they have to stop.
No,
they think there's the right turn on red.
Just go right through.
You're supposed to stop first.
You and I could go on like this, right? but anyway, it's I think this particular one, and it's got is heavily funded by the federal and the state safety departments of the transportation.
So what you point out, the bulk of the funds come from federal and state money.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is it, like 10% local?
We pay 20.
20, okay.
Yeah.
So the one on First Street, let's talk about that, because there was some rumors
Yeah.
about eminent domain and taking away part of the
Not
Elwood
gonna
house.
happen, no.
So let's deny that right now. Can we do that?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not. In fact, everything that is planned, and we've got a couple of different designs that are just starting to kick around now. They've been out there doing some surveying, doing some borings. People maybe saw that about a month ago. The first thing they did was to see what the shape of the road was underneath. Is that going to be an extra cost and all the rest of that? So they did some cores. Anyway, everything's going to be within or on the street side of the curb that we know right now opposite Elwood House. So nothing is on sacred ground.
Very good. We're talking with Bill Nicklas, the city manager of DeKalb. Now, Bill, we talked earlier about eminent domain and structures being rebuilt. 930 Greenbrier now is inhabited again. And we talked about Fairdale, how people rallied around. I was impressed by how people of DeKalb rallied around the people that lost their homes there. And tell us about that. The fire was back on December 22nd.
Right.
And how far have we come since then, Bill?
Well, it's taken a while, as you know, and it's been frustrating for us. And here we are. It was December 22nd, I think. And here we are. It was last Friday, so what was that? May 2nd? Help me. First,
May 2nd,
second. That the building department was able to release 930, and then 934 was the middle section, and 1024 is gone probably forever. But that is because we don't do the work ourselves. Here's what you need to do. You can do it, and we working with the ownership. We've had many conversations with the ownership. I think there have been some issues on their side on communication. Maybe what's actually happening on the ground that tenants have to face, and they've had a lot of frustration. We are frustrated. You can't put a name on the frustration they felt. That their frustrations aren't getting upstairs in that organization. I think they are now. We had the mayor and I had a conversation with the ownership. We've had many, but one as recently as about a week ago, and pointed it out. And we keep a log of our contacts and what we've been trying to do. And I even at one point in a peak of frustration back, it was New Year's Eve, and I was facing the residents who were being told by the management representatives that they could be in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And that was when the building was still collapsed on itself.
Right.
And there was nothing, there was no work had been done on the fire damage in the middle or on the east side. And I just said, no, you're misrepresenting. And they kept going. I said, that's a lie. And it was a lie. And I don't know how people like that can be in a position to represent a company.
Yeah, because they're basing their whole lives on what they tell
They
them.
are.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah. And it isn't enough that they find another place to stay. They lost nearly all their belongings in most cases, not all cases. And also they had, like everybody else, they have friendships in the neighborhood and in the building. And they wanted to that was their home. It was more than just an apartment. So, that was not, I think, attended to as it should have been.
And Bill, when we see something like that as a city, do you learn from that and then we're going to redo this or have a plan now if there's another apartment fire, step 1, step 2, step 3?
I think we followed all those, those step 1, 2, 3, all that from the very first night, and when we got people into a hotel that night and so forth at our expense, and just said, here, you can't possibly sort through everything tonight. Talk to your insurance person and all the rest of that. So here, have some respite. But and we do that again tonight if it happened. The issue is we don't control some real key variables, which is the ownership of the property. We don't control their ability to get contractors in there and how fast they do it. We nudge. Actually, they ended up paying a $10,000 fine, $10,000 worth of fines over the last 4.5 months, 5 months. So that's important to note.
That really is. Now, Fourth Ward Alderman Greg Perkins stepping down, and that makes me want to ask you about the city council in general. Now, can these people all work together now? We have Andre Powell kind of new on there, and tell us about, can everybody work together?
We have to. I mean that. That's our obligation. Do we always? I think that's something we always have to work on. I will say one thing about Greg. I work for a lot of alderpersons and in a lot of different places. I've enjoyed working with Greg a great deal. And as I can say about most of the people I've worked for, I've not only been a servant to their leadership, but I've become friends with them. It doesn't mean that we don't disagree on some things, but the civility that I've enjoyed, and in large part because he's been just a very civil and a decent person, has been very. I'm very grateful for it.
And the bottom line is they all have the commonality that they all want what's best for DeKalb,
Yeah.
just maybe with different ideas.
That's why if you're going to run for office, no matter what you're running for, I think you have to have that idea.
Very good. Now, tell us about you growing up. Now, you mentioned you had a twin brother.
Grew up in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, okay.
Home of the Pittsburgh Pirates, the lowly Pittsburgh Pirates.
We went there 2 summers ago. Pittsburgh is absolutely beautiful.
It's a gorgeous town.
It is gorgeous.
When I grew up there, though, the street lights were on at 3:30 in the afternoon. It was still a coal city.
Okay.
And now it's gorgeous. It's a center of finance, and it's a medical center.
The Andy Warhol Museum. There's a 4-story Andy Warhol Museum we went to.
There it is. But I grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh. Is built in hills, so there are boroughs of Pittsburgh that have their own names and identities, and there were immigrants that came to Pittsburgh over 150 years that developed kept some of their own culture. And I grew up in such a town. It was about 20 minutes from the downtown.
Were you a tough kid? Did you have to be tough in that town?
Oh yeah, and I was a twin, and my brother and I had different physical stature.
Okay.
And my dad told me, I have a picture of myself. I was 3 years old, and he said, "I want you." And Bob was shorter. He had some problems with vision, which were eventually corrected. But in those days, you had to be on your guard. And my dad always said, you got to take care of your brother. So there's a picture, and I've got my arm around him, and I'm squeezing too hard, and he's doing that thing, get your arm off me. But I took that seriously, and nobody messed with my brother.
And you have that special connection with a twin? I always say, I
do.
cousins are twins, same deal, Jimmy and Eddie, and Jimmy's about a foot shorter than Eddie.
Yeah.
And Jimmy had eye problems, too, where the eye patch. And
But, whole thing.
Yeah, but is there even more responsibility when you have a twin like that?
I felt it because it was just, it was drummed into me from the earliest memory. But no one, he and I have been together. He was 3 minutes older than me, so he was born first.
You got the older.
But literally almost every second of our lives, and when you're, and if this is too much information, but I think we dressed alike way too many years after we should have stopped dressing alike. But my mother thought we were so cute. So anyway,
there's a viral video right now.
Yeah, right.
Ladies, twins, they talk at the same. They say the same thing at the same time.
Anyway, it was I like where I grew up, right on the Allegheny River, and
The old man sounded tough. World War II veteran. What did he do for a living?
Well, the Army put him. He was a medic, and the Army put him through. When he got back, the Army put him through medical school.
Oh wow!
So he had his own practice for 45 years in Oakmont, where I grew up.
Just general practitioner.
Yeah, my mother was his bookkeeper.
Okay.
And he had a nurse and an office with like 4 rooms, and he did that until he retired. And when he retired, it was in the late 80s. He was still charging $5 for an office call and $6. He did house calls every morning on the way to work.
Wow.
To see people that were recovering from something or were sick, and then before he went home at night. And you could get everything. This little town was just wonderful. I mean, there was the Italian bakery, and then you went to the meat market, and then the liquor store. But it was all together. It was only 4 blocks long, and everybody knew everybody else, which when you're growing up is good and bad, of course.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell your father,
Right.
So, yeah. But that's...
Now, have you been back? Have you been able to go back?
I used to, when my parents were alive, they're both gone now. I used to go back often. And I go visit my brother. He's in Maryland now.
So now we get to high school time. Now, is this when you start getting interested in politics and running for office?
Yeah, I was president of student council.
You were? Okay.
Yeah, I played sports. And,
what sports?
I played football. I played baseball, and I played golf.
Really?
And why did I play golf? Because this town is known not for much outside of Oakmont, except it's got a world-class golf course.
Oh, wow.
And that's where the U.S. Open is this year. And and so it was up the hill and down the hill kind of town. We lived down the hill. The people who could join the country club lived up the hill.
Okay.
And
So instead of railroad track, you had the hills.
But if you wanted to play golf and you wanted to play on a nice course, you got on the golf. Well, first of all, you became a caddy, and caddy day was Monday. And as long as there wasn't a member bearing down on you, you could stand in the fairway and hit shots on this, like going to Augusta. You know?
Okay. I'll tell you a story. I was a caddy for less than a year. I needed glasses, and I refused to admit that I needed glasses.
Yeah,
so
I did that too.
Because we're
Till sixth grade. Yeah.
Nowhere there somewhere, sir. You know. I was never asked to caddy.
Well, anyway, then you do that, but you really can nail it if you get on a golf team, and then you can play almost any time. But again, you got to get out of the way and pretend like you're a tree when the members come through. And so I did that and played on a golf team 4 years.
Okay. Now, what was it like? Did you have to run for office? Did you become a student president, or was it by
you had to run.
default, or were there other people running?
I won't tell you what the slogan was. It was vote for Nick.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
But now I see. So then you get to Northern, and you get your doctorate. You get your master's in doctorate at Northern, right? And then you go off to. Yeah. Now it said you started city manager in Sycamore in 1992, right?
No, in DeKalb.
Rather in DeKalb in 1992. Yeah. But what did you do from 87 to 92? What was your first job out of college?
I was, 87 and 92. My first job out of college, I worked my way through college out east, where I went to Bucknell. And
Bucknell Bison, you were.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, proud Bucknell Bison.
Yeah, four-corner offense. So
look out for the shot clock.
Look out for them. Yeah. So anyway, I was an apprentice. I didn't finish my apprenticeship. I came out here to go to graduate school. It lasted about a year. Ran out of money. So I started working in the trades, mostly as a laborer, and then I started doing some carpentry, and through some negotiation with the BA at the time, back in the early 70s, I got credit for my time in Pennsylvania and a little bit of extra, and I became a journeyman union carpenter.
Oh, wow.
And I did that working for others, and then for 10 years working in my own business doing that. So.
What a great talent to have. And then, so what drew you to politics? What drew you to be the city manager?
I hated the building department.
Okay.
Because I always overbuilt that these guys who were coming in, I said, I would tell myself these guys aren't qualified and what's going on here. The plumbing inspector was the only one who was. The electrical inspector had been a butcher for a living, and there was another guy. Anyway, an opening came up for the head of the building department, and at that point I had a bad knee already, late 30s, some too much fun,
life of physical labor,
work, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue it, so I was going to do it for a year. I was going to just change it around and then go back and live where my parents were. But one thing led to another, and I stuck with it, and it became acting this, acting that, and then.
Did you dip your toe in the Kishwaukee River? We always played that folklore that they say if you dip your toe in the Kish, you always come back. Yeah. And obviously you did. You didn't go back to Pennsylvania.
I did. But the Allegheny is kind of rough though. So if when you were growing up, you drank Iron City beer in my town. And that was they just put a hose into the river, and I don't think they put much into it except for some sugar, and then here's your beer.
Okay.
So
one of the coolest things I think in any town is in Pittsburgh, they have the wall from the old, is it the Forbes Field?
Yes, very cool.
Where, of course, in the Game 7 of the World Series, Billy Thompson hit the home run.
Yeah. Billy Mazeroski.
Billy Thompson was with the Giants when they won. But and they do that. They recreate that every year, right? They recreate the radio broadcast.
They do.
And sometimes he shows up or did show up.
He did. He just finally passed.
Oh, did he pass?
Yeah,
okay.
he had bare hands like a catcher's mitt. It was terrific.
What a story. Because if you go back and look at that World Series, the Yankees won like 13-2 the first game. They squeaked out the next game 5-8. And the Yankees blew them out every game. And then
so I had two heroes growing up in sports. Roberto Clemente. And Arnold Palmer. And Palmer was not a stranger to Oakmont because when he graduated from high school, his best friend was killed in a car accident, and his best friend's brother was a pro at Oakmont. And so when he came back, he started working with his dad, and he was in the military, and he came back, and he hung around, and got to be a pretty good golfer in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another. And it wasn't unusual. While I'm caddying, I have 2 bags on my back, and I'm walking up 18, and he's sitting there on the porch having a cocktail with the pro.
Wow.
And he was everybody's hero in Western Pennsylvania. He had arms like a bricklayer, and he just was.
And that really unique swing that
Yeah.
only Arnie could do. And of course, Roberto Clemente hit his 3,000th hit, his last
Yes.
plate appearance. Boy,
Yes. When
and died going to Nicaragua to help his countrymen.
My earliest memory at Forbes Field, which is where I saw him, was he would just before the game, and he's shagging flies in the back there, and he caught a basket catch. So he would not face us in the crowd behind him. He would just throw the ball back, and we would get him at Mr. Clemente, and he wouldn't turn around. But he was amazing. His pride in his culture and his ability to inspire young boys was terrific.
And his Cub, he was a Cub killer, too. How many times I see him just destroy the Cubs back in the day? Him and Willie Stargell. So, you spent some time at NIU. Tell us about that. And then you had a little time at Kishwaukee College as well.
Yeah, I was hired by the board and John Peters and the board in 2011. My wife had died in 2009. For a couple of years, my last 2 years in Sycamore, I have to say I was kind of adrift. And so that promised something, and he was looking for somebody who could have some connection to the local scene. And that was why I started. By the time I left, I was vice president for operations, so getting back into my wheelhouse. And
Student safety was a big issue for you, right? You weren't
was.
worried about the safety of the students?
It was. So, and then, like I said, I went to Fairdale, and then I was hired by Kishwaukee College, and that was a wonderful experience too, to end up in operations there.
And you mentioned your lovely wife. Tell us about that special scholarship over there at Kishwaukee College.
Yeah, I started after she passed away. Kishwaukee College was so important to her career. She got out of high school, got married very early. Tragic circumstances took her husband, and she had 2 young kids who were my stepsons and loved them dearly. But she, and of course I didn't know them then or anything, but her parents helped her get some work here and there, and she was working at the hospital, cleaning up and doing stuff like that. And her mother was a nurse, and might have been the head nurse at the old DeKalb Public Hospital at some point. And anyway, she took a couple courses at Kish and liked it in nursing and graduated there with her RN. Went on to get her bachelor's degree and eventually got her master's degree. And when she passed away, she was at OSF in Rockford and was the deputy administrator there. So she went from, she did flight nursing and a lot of other things, and then she got into administration as she got older. And that was when we met. So.
Yeah, so where'd you meet?
We met, she's at Struthers, so Tim's sister.
Okay.
And Tim set us up. And we went on a date, and things happened from there pretty quickly.
Now, how are the boys doing? Are the boys okay?
They're doing very well. They're one's in Colorado and one's in Arizona, and they each have a couple of grandkids. And
Wonderful.
They have kids, and my grandkids, and love them dearly.
Great. We're talking to Bill Nicklas about various issues concerning the city of DeKalb. Now let's get back into the heavy stuff here. Now, when I first came to town, Nestle's was the only big hitter in town. And now, of course, we have Amazon, Facebook, Ferrera, and the Kraft Heinz building. I have another joke, by the way, Bill. The Kraft Heinz building, they're a little bit behind in their building, but they're going to catch up. All right, that's a
good.
Heinz joke.
I get it.
But tell us about that, because what has this meant to the city of DeKalb to have these huge structures out there?
It is huge. We all experience it every year. We just got our tax bills. Amen. And but the EAV of the valuation of property in as a whole in the city of DeKalb has gone up by billions of dollars. So our EAV right now, that's 1/3 of the actual, say, market price, roughly market price. Now is a little over 1.3 billion. When I started in 2019 in January, we were at the 2018 EAV was just was it 475?
Okay.
So almost tripled it. Well,
Wow.
yeah, definitely tripled. So what does that mean? Well, eventually it should, if we're good stewards and good managers of the public purse, then we should be able to find a way with that kind. That's a denominator when you calculate the rates. And I'm not going to go into this. Everybody,
No, 'cause we'll
we
lose
turn
our
it off. You'll
listener,
lose your last your last listener. But anyway, the point is that it helps a lot, and it helps communities lower their overall rate, which is what we just saw in our tax bills.
Now, there's no mystery about the Heinz building, right? We had Mayor
Yeah.
Barnes here last week and talking about the fact that there's a delay, but
Yeah. Well,
we're moving forward.
Yeah, we're out with the old. The issue was around. Actually, it was around concrete. It wasn't around the soil so much. And that's all been broken up, and the tower is down, and they're on the way to starting to build it up again, and
Okay.
hopefully get it done. Catch up, and gain some ground.
I didn't mean to blow past your time at Sycamore. Tell us about how you ended up switching from DeKalb to Sycamore as a city manager.
I I guess invited to interview in Sycamore after I left DeKalb. There was 1 year in between there. John Castle, Tim Struthers, and others gave me a job for a year, and that's at that time I met Joyce, and I thought this is going to be tough because Tim and I were officers of the company, and Thanksgiving is never going to be the same.
No.
So I went to John and I just said, John, I this is going to be tough. So he released me, and then at about the same time I was courted by Sycamore, and I was there for 13 years. I have to say it was a lovely time. I love the town, I love the people in Sycamore. And by the way, if I'm not going to play sides here, but Sycamore also claims that Kishwaukee, towing the Kishwaukee. So and they say we had it first. So you can have the mayors argue over that.
Right, because that was a big thing with where the town hall was going to be. Right?
Back in the day. I'm not quite that old.
No. But then they fought over you. DeKalb and Sycamore fought over you as well, too. That happens as well. Now, I want to talk about the city clerk position. Now, we had Brad Hoy here, and tremendous info. I've known Brad for 20-some years, and even Mayor Barnes said the same thing. We don't really know what the position is right now at city clerk because obviously all the duties have been reassigned to other people.
Been assumed.
And he was saying that we're going to get creative, is how Cohen put it, and see what this job might look like. What is your input on that for the city clerk position?
So when I came in, I just dug in 2019 doing city manager stuff, and the executive assistant was doing most of the clerk functions at that point, and eventually took on all the clerk functions within a year and a half, and has been doing those either part-time before I got there and full-time after I got there, with great skill and very comprehensive. In fact, in any given day, she also finds time to put a few minutes into a special project of hers, which is finally panned out. Maybe the mayor mentioned this, where most all of our older records were, of course, paper, and so she's digitized all those records going back to the beginning of going back to about 1900.
Wow.
And it's terrific, and obviously it takes a long time. She's been doing that as long as I've been here, and comes in sometimes evenings and weekends and does that. And so that's a real story. Anyway,
So you don't want to reassign the old duties to
no, not at all. It's just like we used to have a treasurer too, who was elected.
Yeah.
And now we have a finance department and finance director, and everything's working fine. Ultimately, we'll get there. I understand why people just generally, it's the basis of our democracy. You want to be able to elect people who are serving you, most people. Although I think the more you get to know about, and there wasn't enough time to do it when there was that referendum campaign. The city people like myself couldn't talk about it, so I couldn't get out there and campaign and all that stuff. But anyway, I think if people came to understand that all that was being done and done well, they would say, "Oh, well, I guess we don't need that anymore." We used to elect the police chief too, so that was a long time.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Okay.
And
So
we called him a sheriff, but he wasn't the sheriff.
So we'll see how that plays out then with that city clerk position.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the other day I applied for a FOIA request. I don't know what clown you got running that department, but no, that's my former partner.
I'll tell him that.
Of course, is in charge of the FOIA requests. And I was reading the duties of the city manager.
Yes.
That's one of them is to fulfill Freedom of Information Act, which is also known as a FOIA request.
Yes.
And we get a lot of those in DeKalb, don't we?
We do. We do.
I mean, almost to the point that's a full-time job.
Well, it's not quite full-time, but it's certainly, half-time. Half-time job.
All right, very good. But I had to mention Scott, of course. And I want to mention that you guys recently approved the school resource officer, and we've learned the value of that. And I also want to mention Chief David Bird and what assets he's been to the city of
Terrific
DeKalb.
job. I'm very, very happy that we made that choice. And, he brings a humanity to the job, which is welcome, particularly with that title and with those responsibilities. And I'm very pleased to have him on board. And I'm very pleased with how we've grown the department. We needed to fill some holes, and we did that. We have a much more diverse department, very much more. And it's, I think, making a difference.
Yeah, they put together a recruitment video, which was really slick.
Yeah.
I was talking to Chief about that because they didn't really pull any punches. Like,
No.
you want to be a police officer, there's some heavy stuff you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's an accountability there too, which people can never escape. Once you're in that position, you would give your life for somebody, and you have to take that seriously.
Very good. And we have Officer Erickson from the fire department is due in to talk about the new fire station that
Yeah.
opened last
Yeah.
week. How exciting is that?
That's very exciting. So we have all four quadrants covered for now. It doesn't mean that every call we're just waiting around for a call. We run a lot of calls, and many of them are simultaneous. So, a couple of the buildings are empty as we're moving around. And sometimes one station will have to go across town depending on how many people are already assigned to a car accident or a
Right.
fire or something like that. So, but it gives us the coverage and the response time. That's what it's all about. And we played with this for a lot of years. We used to be a little cute. You need 4 or 5, and really 5 if you're going to make a difference at a major fire. But we were sending, of course. You see, what people always ask: why are you sending engine and the ambulance? It's just an ambulance call. Why are you doing that? Well, that's because then those 4 can go over there if they have to.
Right.
And somebody else come, like a chiefy will come across and run across town in one of those little red SUVs. Well, the 2 and 2 was looked good on paper, but we weren't always getting there. The firstest with the mostest, and that's what we needed to do. There's only one standard, and I was saying this, and the council certainly agreed with this. There's a gold standard, but there's no silver standard, because if somebody's life is on the brink, and you got to get there in five minutes or around that time, then what excuse is going to be enough if it's 10 minutes?
Right, exactly. I also want to mention the $1.6 million over that raised by the Give DeKalb County. Of course, you volunteer with so many nonprofits, Bill. It must do your heart good to see our community give again every year.
It does, and it keeps growing. It keeps Dan in a job, Dan Temple.
Yeah, Dan Temple doing a great job with it.
He does a great job.
Finally, we received so many awards through the years, but I just recently were voted the DeKalb City Hall of Fame, which I'm a fellow member.
Yes.
And I was joking about what hat you wore, whether DeKalb or Sycamore. The baseball players, when they go Hall of Fame, they wear their like Pudge, wears Red Sox hat or his White Sox hat.
Yeah.
But you received the John C. Roberts Community Service Award from Kishwaukee College, and I know that means a lot to you because you value education so much. And why is learning so important to you?
Well, I've never stopped, and I have a lot more to learn. And almost any critic will tell you that I have a lot more to learn. But they're right in an important respect that I'm curious and I can't help myself. And I love learning, and I like to know that everybody's got an equal chance to do that.
Now, this is a unique forum. We get to hear you speak at city council meetings all the time, but what would you like to say to all the people in DeKalb County? And that's all the people in DeKalb County that you've touched your lives. What it's meant to serve those folks all these years?
Makes me immensely proud that we pull together at times when we need to. COVID was no small thing.
No.
We all went through, and we've been through many economic crises, and we come out. I came from a small business owner, and I was a small business owner, and most of our businesses are small businesses in our community. And I love how people come to their their aid and support them. And so I say thank you, DeKalb. I've really enjoyed serving.
Well, I know I speak for all the community here when I say that your efforts have not gone unnoticed, and we are eternally grateful. And we thank you, Dr. Bill Nicklas, for all you've done and will continue to do. And just thank you so much for your time today, Bill. We really
Thank you,
appreciate
Terry. It's been a pleasure.
Dr. Bill Nicklas, our guest here on podcast number 8, TD Ryan Unleashed.
TD Ryan Unleashed is brought to you by the Junction Eating Place at 816 West Lincoln Highway in DeKalb. Open 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. The Junction is a longtime DeKalb staple, with world-famous breakfast served all day long and the best lunch and dinner specials. Stop on by today and tell them TD sent you.
Look at you, having it together. You've got a car. You have a house. Now get your car and house insured together with a State Farm agent. A local agent can help you customize your coverage and save when you bundle your home and auto insurance. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability, amount of discount, savings, and eligibility may vary.
See State Farm agent Scott Zimet at 2587 Sycamore Road, Suite D in DeKalb, or call 815-748-3101. Like a good neighbor, Scott Zimet is there.